everyone, I'm Leena. In this video, we are going to talk all about wrists. Wrists can be a challenging area for many folks when they begin practicing yoga. A lot of common yoga poses such as downward dog, plank, and even a tabletop involve bearing weight on the wrists and having the wrist joint in this kind of extended position. And so in this video, I'm going to show you some ways to adapt those types of poses to bear less weight on the wrists or to find more comfortable positions for your wrists whenever you're doing them or when you're in a class if they get uncomfortable for you. And then in the second part of the video, I'm going to show you some ways to build your capacity so that over time, over months or years, those poses, you might be able to adapt your body and build strength so that those poses no longer cause you discomfort. So I'm going to start by just showing those three common poses in case they're new to you. So this is a tabletop. This is a plank pose. And this is downward dog. So in tabletop and plank, one great option is to have blocks and to grip your hands around your blocks kind of in a claw shape and squeeze in with your thumb and index finger so that you're bringing some of that angle of extension out of your wrists. This will do some double duty and you'll feel some work and strength in your forearms, but you won't feel that compression in your wrist joint. Another option in those two poses, plank and tabletop, is to be on fists instead. And so here you've taken that angle of extension out of the wrists and you're nice and sturdy. For downward dog, where there's not as much angle in the wrist, if you need just a little bit of support, an option is to roll up the front of your mat and have the heel of your hand up on that roll and your fingers over the edge. And that's going to reduce the angle and take some of the load or intensity out of the wrist joints. You can also play around with down dog with blocks. The fists aren't going to work so well though. So here's a version of that block option with down dog and with plank. All right, so those are ways to reduce the amount of that angle of extension in the wrists. The next strategy I'm going to show you is to take weight out of the wrists, to deload those poses. So we can do this using blocks where the hands are up on blocks and then a little bit more weight is in the legs and knees. But to even take that a step further, having yourself more upright using a chair can be a great alternative. So whenever I use a chair, I want to make sure that all 4 feet of the chair are on my mat so it's nice and secure. And then from here, I can place my hands on the seat of the chair and find a tabletop. You can even have a little bit of bend in the knees, especially if you're taller. And in this tabletop shape, you can do a lot of the same things that you would often do in a yoga pose or in a yoga class from table. So you can do your cat-cows, you can do balancing, and all sorts of other options. From here, you can also go back to a plank pose or even back to a down dog. Another alternative to take all of the weight out of the wrists is to be at a wall. So that with the hands at the wall, you can work towards plank or towards a down dog, pressing into the wall so that hardly any weight is in the hands. Most of your weight is in your lower body and there's a lot less pressure or intensity on your wrists. All right, the last strategy, which might be a good one, especially if you have an acute injury, is to just take the wrists out of the equation entirely. So, for example, in a table pose, rather than being on the wrists, you might be on your forearms where there's absolutely no weight or pressure in the wrists. I like to do this. If I'm trying to simulate a table pose, I like to do this up on blocks at this medium height. That gives a perfect little spot for my forearms to rest. And essentially that block height isn't so different from my forearm, so that I'm at a pretty similar shape in my back as I would be if I were up on my hands. For other poses like downward dog or plank where you need more sturdiness, then you'll probably want to have your forearms all the way down on the ground with your elbows underneath shoulders. You could have your hands apart or interlaced, and I'll show here how you might do a plank pose or a dog pose on the forearms. Sometimes this pose is called dolphin. You might need to bend your knees a little extra, more than you maybe would in down dog. And this will be a great way to get a lot of the same work in the shoulders, the same length through the spine, but your wrists don't have any weight in them. All right, so those are some strategies for adapting as you build capacity, perhaps. And here are the ways to build capacity now. So the first thing to work on is your wrist mobility and just getting more comfortable with having weight on your hands. So you could start with the backs of your hands down and just gently rocking. I kind of call this walking out the hands. And then you can also be flat on the palms and turn the hands in all different angles. You can also get quite creative with trying to bear weight on the sides of your hands, on your knuckles, and even on your fingertips. And you might really start this quite gradually by having most of your weight in your knees or by having your hands up on a chair. And then over time, you might come back more into a table where you are bearing more weight. Especially this walking on the hands where you're up on the fingertips and in these different palm positions, it's going to help you build more awareness and strength through your forearms and help you start to have some more mobility in your wrist joints as well. Next, I'm going to show a couple exercises a little bit closer. So these are 2 exercises for building up your forearm muscles. This first one is a simple finger tapping exercise. You're going to be working on coordination and also on the strength of the front of the forearms with this one. You can start with one hand at a time, or you can do both hands together. And sometimes it's a little entertaining how one hand has a harder time with it. So you're just going to start to rapidly tap your various fingers. I'm starting with my thumbs and then moving to my index fingers. My elbows often want to bend here. So to really work on the strength and mobility in the hands, you want to try to keep your elbows as straight as possible. And then I'm moving to my middle fingers. And then as I get to the littler fingers, it can get a lot more dicey, but just do your best with it. You can play with that in a lot of different ways, creating different rhythms, going one finger at a time, and all the while try to keep your elbows straight and your shoulders relatively on top of your wrists so that you're really working on your strength and mobility in this position. And you'll notice I'm on quite a high stool. That's going to be easier for the wrists. You can gradually progress from that high stool down to a chair and then perhaps down to the floor after that. The next exercise I'm going to show is going to help strengthen the underside of the forearms and really help you control the weight that's going down into the wrist joints. So here I have my hands right underneath my shoulders again with my elbows straight. And I'm going to do what's called a palm raise. So it looks like this. Slowly up and then even more slowly back down. I'm going to show a couple compensations that tend to happen for people. Some folks use their thumbs like a kickstand. And here I'm kind of propping my wrist up with my thumb rather than actually using these muscles. So try to keep your thumbs hovering the whole time. We also want to make sure that we're just rising up to this ridge of knuckles where the finger meets the palm, not up to the tips of the fingers. And it doesn't have to be a big, huge lift. It can just be a little bit. The other common compensation is that the shoulders are coming way back behind the wrists. And that can be okay to start. Maybe that's where you begin. But over time, we want to build the amount of weight coming down into the wrists by bringing the shoulders right on top of the wrists and keeping the elbows straight. Again, you might progress from a higher surface down to a lower one, eventually moving down to a table and possibly someday moving back to like a knee plank, or I've even seen it done in a full plank if you really want to hulk out. So I'm just going to show a few more palm raises, and to build strength in these and really build your forearm capacity, you'll want to do a number of these in a row. I would say at least 8 to 10 in a row, and then at least 2 or 3 sets. And feel free to take breaks and shake out your wrists between sides. So I'm showing a full set here with nice steady form. And then after, you can give your wrists a little shake or a little twirl. All right, the final thing I want to teach you is a movement that really helps us work on strengthening the arch of the wrist. And so your wrist bones form a little arch, and through that arch run a number of nerves. So if you've heard of carpal tunnel syndrome, that's when that arch compresses and the carpal tunnel nerve gets compressed. So this exercise, we're going to place your index finger to the center of your palm and then squeeze the base of your thumb and the base of your pinky toward that. You can keep your fingers apart. So it's not about getting your fingers to touch, but squeeze the bases together. And then you can remove your finger and see if you've kind of created this arch shape. And I think that this looks sort of like a taco shell. So trying to make your hand like a taco where you'd have some room to put all the yummy things that go inside tacos. And keep doing that. Keep that squeeze. And now we're going to turn our taco into a duck. So as if you're doing like a shadow puppet hand, keep squeezing index finger and thumb base together and point your fingers forward. You can even turn your duck head around a little bit. And oh boy, you'll probably feel your forearm muscles shaking, the back of your wrist lengthening and decompressing. And then just go ahead and let that go. Let's try it on the other side. So taco duck hand, try it with me. You wrap around your finger. So base of pinky, base of thumb, try to squeeze in. Just hold that to start. Keep that squeeze and then try to bring your fingers forward into this weird duck head shape. You can wiggle a little bit there. This is something I recommend doing often if you're working at a computer and if you want to build capacity for your yoga practice, for your wrists to feel good. So you could even set yourself a little taco duck hand timer and try to remember to do it regularly. All right, thanks for joining me. I hope that this helps you feel a little bit more confident, modifying things to make your practice work for your body. Yoga is all about your own internal experience, not what the poses look like. So I hope that this helps you find ways to be comfortable and confident in your practice. I'll see you on the mat.